All right. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this fine Monday. My name is Jason Levine, aka Beetlejace. Very nice to see you here. Thank you for joining me. Here we are once again with Audio 101, Part 16. It never ends. Much like learning and knowledge, just keeps on going, keeps on growing, keeps on expanding. And that's what we're doing now. We're taking a lot of the bits and pieces that we've learned from previous Audio 101s and starting to implement them in real practice here. And in this case, for the next couple of episodes, we're talking about the art of the remix. So we're going to be working on drums today. And we're going to sort of pick up where we left off with the previous song. I was thinking of switching the song today, but I thought, well, we were doing the background vocals on Friday. And that was kind of in my head. And I am, in fact, I am remixing this for real. This isn't just in practice for fun. This ultimately will eventually make it out there to Spotify in a new collection that I'm putting together. So you're getting to be part of it as I'm doing it, which is fun for me and hopefully fun for you. So where did we leave off? Well, you may recall that the past episode 15, we were focusing on a lot of background vocals. And we hadn't even really treated the lead vocal. We'd added some reverb and a couple of other things, but we spent the bulk of the time really creating a stereo image, a very lush, thick-sounding background, something really glued together that just sounded beautiful and harmonious. Let's take a quick listen to a little bit of that, and I've pulled out the drums and the bass and the pianos. Actually, maybe we'll put the piano back in there. Just so that you can actually hear what we did with those voices. Take a quick listen. If you are what you eat, from your head down to your feet, and baby, Latin, maybe why not even onions make me cry? And if you're gonna feed your face, you'd better take a minute and think about just what it is that you are putting in on, like the toot-toot monster. The toot-toot monster. The toot-toot monster. Rise. Toot-toot monster. Oh, no. Toot-toot monster. Got some automation going here on the fader. Toot-toot monster. The toot-toot monster. Don't be a toot-toot monster. That is a social comment, by the way. Okay, so that's what we did on Friday. So we've got lots of stuff going on here, and once again, we're really going to focus on the drums, which typically means that I'll kind of leave everything else out. Now, if you look at it right here, you'll see, now this was all live multi-track drums. In fact, I'll play a little bit of the original version for you so you can kind of get an idea, or actually an early mix of the tune, so you can hear what it sounded like in its original incarnation. We've got everything multi-tracked and recorded individually. So the kick is on one track, the snare, the hat, the two toms, and then the overheads, which you can see here. And one of the things that I like to do before I start really doing any kind of remix is sort of group all the like tracks together. We did this with the background vocals, basically creating a bus for them. I've already created a drum bus, just a way, again, to kind of send all the parts of the drums to one fader. Now, we won't really do anything bus-related until all the individual drums are treated. But it's just a good idea. It's a good practice to kind of get everything on one fader so that if you are going to listen against the music, I can kind of pull everything down with one step, with one fader, as opposed to kick, snare, tom, tom, hat, hat, zzz, zzz. You get the idea. So up at the top here in the mixer, we're going to, let's go up to our kick track, which is right here. And at the very top, the signal flow here is our inputs and outputs. And rather than output to the master fader, currently this was set to none, don't know how I did that. Instead of going to the master bus, we're actually going to go to this specific drum bus, which is really, again, just another way to group or subgroup all of these like instruments together. So we're going to go ahead and place this on the bus, do the same thing for the snare here. All right. Drums, 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 drums. So now that we've got everything grouped, let's just take a listen to what we have here. Now, I haven't adjusted any levels or anything, so this is going to be completely imbalanced. So maybe let's just start a playback here. We'll start it at the beginning. This starts very simply with just kick and snare, no hat at all. In fact, and you can see that just by looking at the tracks here. Actually, what you're seeing on the hi-hat track there is just some bleed. All right. so let's go ahead and solo this. Kill my speakers out here. Didn't realize you were hearing all that. And let's go ahead and play this back. Okay. Let's just start pulling everything down to 0. Okay. So here's our kick and snare. Now, when I start working with drums, these are recorded very well. You can see the levels are nice, hot. They're filling the space. It's a good way to sort of visually identify that. So I will start usually with bringing kind of all the instrumentation down to around -4. Again, working digitally, you want to give yourself headroom. You want to give yourself headroom for a number of reasons. One, that's going to help and improve your mix in general, right? If you're always kind of peaking at 0, then after the fact, you're having to pull things down and readjust balances. So start with everything slightly attenuated. There's no absolute here. Sometimes I do -3, sometimes I do -6, sometimes I kind of leave it at 0 and just drop everything a couple dB, and then overheads are generally dropped the most, anywhere from 10 to 12 dB below the main kick and snare. It just depends what you've captured there. But we're going to start, and I'll sort of keep the kick at around -4. Again, this is just a reference. We'll adjust these as we add effects and things. You will naturally have to keep adjusting these. So let me just play this again, and I'm just going to try and bring everything else in so we can kind of get a fairly decent dry balance. Now, one thing that I want to focus on, you can see here, I don't play the toms a lot. They're sort of accents and fills. So to be able to hear those, I'm going to just make sure that I'm focusing on a section here that's got some toms. So I might wind this back as we're adjusting levels, but in the meantime, let's take a quick listen here. Yes, and this absolutely applies to all DAWs. Got the hi-hat, right? Discrete. Now I tend to like to do the drum panning as if I'm sitting at the drums. So like I've got the hi-hat on my left side. All right, and let's wind back here so we can hear some of the high and low tom here. Bring those up. Now, toms are curious because a lot of times, sometimes they kind of keep toms a little buried, especially in today's music where there's really not a lot of drum fills anyway, per se. It's usually like a loop that's some kind of whole loop beat fill thing. But when you're just playing like standard tom fills, there's two schools of thought. One is to kind of just keep it rolling. Another is to really make it pop and accent and create some kind of, disturbance. And by that, I mean you make them a bit louder so that they really stick out, particularly in a song where they're not played a lot, right? If you're doing paradiddles or something, Peggy Sue, playing toms all the time, you don't make them stand out because that's the whole beat, right? But here, they're really just accents. So when you kind of hear boom, pa, boom, pa, boom, pa, boom. I want that boom to I want it to freak me out, man. Lets me know that something is happening. So I tend to make these a little bit louder, and then we're going to use compression and gating to also help us kind of clean up that sound. Also, while I'm here, I probably want to pan these a little bit. So the floor tom, again, not an absolute here. Sometimes they do 100% to a particular side. We'll probably do about 85 right. And this high tom, because of where it was located, again, I like to recreate the positioning of the drums as I sit at them. Sometimes people mix in the reverse, as if you're watching the drummer, right? And it's funny, I'm left-handed, but I play right-handed drums. But I like to, when I'm mixing it, generally, it changes. I like to mix in the way that I played them, so they follow the order. So it actually goes from left to right. Okay, so we'll do about 25% right on the high tom, 86 on the low. Take a listen. Okay. While we're rebalancing, I'm going to play it for you in just a second here. Let's just go back to all the drums for just a moment here. Let me re-solo these. I think actually the balances are okay. Oh, I need to raise the overheads a little bit. Okay, so let's do that. And also I've got these left and right. So these I will typically pan basically hard left, hard right. And like I said before, your overheads, anywhere from, 5 to 15 dB down. Just depends on the kind of sound that you're going for. Remember, the overheads are also going to give you room ambience, the room that the drums are recorded in, which I was in a fantastic room. I want to preserve some of that, but I also don't want, they're also, the overheads are meant for cymbals, but they're also going to pick up some of the drums. So it's a careful balance. So right now, dry at around -11, that's working for me. Okay, clean, dry, nice. Okay. Let's go ahead and just for a brief moment. So what do I want to do with this? So now that we've got the drums in here, if I just kind of bring everything else back in for a second. Here, let's... And you can see what I mean by attenuating, because like I've got the lead vocal way up here. Got all this other music going on. Lots of stuff happening here. So, you want to kind of you want to start with things fairly conservative because you're going to be adjusting these levels as you start remixing. So we're going to take all the vocals out and just listen to the music here for a moment. Oh, and I've got automation on these, so these are going to be moving all over. It's okay. Now you might be listening going, oh man, those drums sound flat and crappy. Well, yeah, they're flat and there's no effects, no EQ, no nothing. So that's what we want to bring to life. Now, in the original version of this, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, and everywhere else, under Jason Levine, this is actually a rough cut of the video. So this is the live take. Now, the album that this is on is called Just Play Piano, Vocal, and Drums. And that's all it is. I didn't do any overdubs. That's why we're doing this remix with all this overdubbed stuff. This is the actual session, the actual take that you're hearing. You can watch me play it here, but I wanted you to kind of take a listen to the drum sounds in particular. I went for a very sort of snappy, poppy sound, which I kind of want to recreate. Interestingly, I didn't go with the exact same sound on the released version. This was an early, rough cut, early mix of the take, but this will kind of give you an idea of the look and the sound. And let's go ahead and play this back, just a couple seconds of this. The toot-toot monster, don't be a toot-toot monster. Oh, that was right at the end. Okay, here, let's wind back a little bit. All right, take a listen here. Were you eating burritos? Were they filled with beans? If you are what you eat, from your head down to your feet, baby, that maybe why not even onions make me cry like a toot-toot monster. And you can hear it's really compressed, right? Like it almost sounds like it's almost like in reverse snapping. That's some pretty heavy limiting. And I kind of want to go for a similar thing here. And I need it to be even snappier because now we've got more stuff happening. So again, you can use compression and limiting, not just to treat dynamics, but to affect the overall sound, make something punchier, louder, thwappier. There's a lot of things that you can do, and you can see I did a little bit of that here. All right, so let's get out of this. Let's go back here to Audition, and let's start what we came here to do. So the first place we're going to start, of course, is the kick drum. You're going to kind of work your way up with each of these drums, and we'll go through each of them one by one. All right. Now the kick is always, this is really, as far as working with drums goes, the kick has to be, this can take a lot of time, especially if you're kind of new to equalization. This is sort of the driving force. Now, again, depending upon the kind of music that you're making, you might not have a very accentuated kick drum, in which case you might do something like kick drum replacement. I showed that on a couple streams ago where I was replacing particular drums, and maybe we'll do a little bit of that here. I'll just show it to you. But ultimately, you want to make sure that your kick is recorded well, hopefully. And if not, there's ways to fix it, and that's really where EQ comes in. Now, as I talk about a lot, of course, we've got some beautiful EQ in the form of our parametric on-track EQ here, 5-band parametric with high and low shelving and high-pass, low-pass filtering. I love this EQ, but for kick drums and things where I know I'm probably going to use a little bit of gating. All right, and if you take a listen here, again, we're just hearing the kick by itself. I'll make it a little bit louder for just a moment. We won't distort because I've got my new gen limiter on the master here. Now, I'm technically playing what's known as a 4 to the floor kick, meaning that if I'm in 4/4 time, which I am, every downbeat, every pulse, I'm playing the kick. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's known as 4 to the floor. Okay, so there's some snare bleed, there's some other bleed. It's not bad, and to be honest, it's not bothering me, and it's a nice clean kick. Now, this happened to be recorded with, for those of you interested in microphones, a standard in the industry for some 25, 30 years already, which is the AKG D112E. I don't have it handy, otherwise I'd show it to you. Kind of looks like, that doesn't look like it. It kind of looks like a flying saucer egg, for lack of a better description. It's kind of oval shaped, sort of short microphone, goes into the hole or up against the head if there's no cutout in the drum head. It's beautiful, it's punchy, it has a nice little bump in the sort of 2 to 5, I think it's around 3K, 4K range. That's what gives you that clickiness of the kick drum. You know, kick drum is a very complex signal. There's the low end thump, but there's also, you want some presence up there. Now, having said that, it depends again on the style of music, the type of drums. If you're recording 60s Slingerland or Ludwigs without an open head, there's not going to be a lot of clickiness, but there's still brightness. There's still some upper mid-range present, even in a kick drum, that can be very nice. Now, some of that can be preserved via the overheads, but also, depending upon the microphone used, some of that can also be captured via the kick drum mic itself. Because I might want to gate this, I will generally go to one of my favorite go-tos, which you've seen me use here many, many times, which is the SSL E channel. Okay, for where I also have lots of presets that I've made and modified to kind of get me started here. All right, so as we take a listen, so first we're just going to make sure we don't have any gating on. We're not compressing anything yet. I want to just sort of work on the EQ first. Now, the EQ overall sounds pretty good, maybe even a little flat. All right, so one of the things we can do is sort of find a fundamental here for that low kick drum. And again, as I'm looking at my frequency graph, I can see right around here, right around 60, 63, that's kind of where that low-end fundamental of that kick drum is. Remember, that'll change depending upon the size of the kick drum. Now, I mentioned D112E. That's kind of the standard today. Now, I happen to have that, and I also have, talking about Ringo here, I have the D12E, which is, actually, I don't know that it's the D112E anymore. Scratch the E. D112. There might be another letter there. The D12E, which is actually from the 60s, is the kick drum mic that was used on Ringo's kicks and many others in the 60s and 70s. It's a big sort of square microphone, super heavy. That microphone, very different sound by itself. So while I was just saying that D112 has kind of this upper mid-range bump where you get this kind of clickiness, the D12E, no, because that wasn't a preferred kind of sound back in the day. Also, it has a little bit more presence and clarity in the lower mids where things tend to get a bit muddy, which is why it made sort of classic kick drums that didn't have any kind of cutout or hole in them a little more present, especially when they do like a sustained kick. You know, Ringo especially. You kind of felt this, I can't even describe it. You could feel the material of the drum, and that's because of this lower mid boost that this D12 microphone had. So the mic is going to change the sound a little bit. The positioning, of course, will change the sound, and then the size and the actual type of drum. So many things to consider, but that's why we have equalization. That's why we have all this control. So here, because I can see it's right around 60, 70 hertz, I can start here at 60, and we can start kind of pumping this up. Nice. All right. So we'll boost a little, only to back off, right? I'll go to about a 2.4. All right. Now I'm sensing some low-mid unpleasantness here. So we're going to get rid of that. I'm finding it in a couple places, actually. I'm going to make this bandwidth even more narrow. Okay. All right. And now we're going to try and focus on some of that upper mid-range clickiness. Right around there, right around 3K. Now, some mix engineers like to give you like a boost at around 10 or more to kind of give it a total lift. So take a listen here. Now, this is pretty significant, but I actually like it for this track. We'll start with the EQ off, and then we'll kick it back in, and you'll kind of hear what this sounds like. All right, it's a little brighter, it's a little snappier, it's got plenty of low-end punch, but now you can hear that what it needs, because my dynamics, while they're fairly consistent, and actually, this is something else that you want to consider as you're going into compression once you've EQ'd. That's good for me. I don't think it needs any more. I might even back off a little bit here on some of the top-end click, just a hair, because I don't quite need quite so much. You know, the dynamics are pretty even, and I'm playing it dynamically. In other words, I'm playing it louder where there's supposed to be accents. That's a good thing. We want that. But of course, that also means that will sort of determine how we're adjusting the compression here. So do we want to compress more, or do we want to really limit this kick? Well, I know I really want to limit the snare. I think we can probably get away with compressing the kick, make it kind of a bit more evened out, thicken it, add a little bit of gating just to clean it up, and then that'll kind of do it. So what we'll do now is I'm going to play this back. I'm just going to start with a ratio, let's say, of around 4 to 1. Just by looking at the wave here, I've got probably a 4 to 7 dB difference in some of my accenting, and that's fine. Now again, you've got sort of simplified dynamics controls here on this SSL channel. This isn't a super fast attack, so I'm going to leave the attack slower. Now this also will change the characteristic of the compression, a fast attack versus a slower attack. A slower attack is going to let more of that attack transient, the click, to pass through. That's what we want. And then we'll use the threshold accordingly to really start to squeeze things a bit down, okay? And then we'll add the gating as well. So let's go ahead and wind back a bit more, give myself plenty of space to work with here. And we'll start dialing in the compression. Nice. And you can watch the metering here to see in terms of the release time. You know, I don't want it to like hold the kick drum, right? I kind of want it to be, you know, compress and release quickly. So that's looking pretty good. Now let's start to kick in this gate. Now you've got two settings here, your range, which is going to be able to, again, allow you to close that window down to silence, which would be this range of 40 here, or do we want to leave a little bit of the background in there? You know, it would naturally bleed through anyway. We can determine that once we listen a bit more. You've also got this expansion, this release control here, to, again, how long that gate stays open, right? We want this to be fairly quick. We don't want... So let's wind this back again and take a listen, and I'll start to set the gate here. Now you can actually hear the gate circuitry, it's clipping the attack. So that's telling me that I probably need to put this into fast attack mode. Then, now the attack comes back. Now you can just hear a little bit of the snares bleeding in there. And that's okay. Okay, before. Wind it back again. So this is with nothing. You can hear the whole kit in there. Let's kick it in. Now again, I don't want to squash that attack, so I got to be very careful with the threshold here. And that's why having a little bit of bleed of the snare, not a big deal, not a problem. Okay, we're checking the in-out here, just to make sure that these are consistent. This is nothing. Sounds flat and flubby. Here's the after. Cool. Okay. Now, if we want to take this a step further, one thing that we can do to just thump the kick a little more is to actually add a limiter to this. Now, I don't always typically do this, and again, this can be done with our multiband compressor or tube-modeled compressor, you know, depending upon the style that I'm going for. And for this one, I might use something like, I've got some louder effects, just things to make things a little bit louder, a little bit crunchier. Oftentimes, I will go to something like this Ultra Maximizer Track Slammer. If you take a listen to that, so there's before with no effects at all. Here's after. Now, in doing this, of course, is that now it's kind of amplifying some of that bleed. So this would mean that we've either got to adjust, you know, that gate a little bit more, or just back off a little bit here. I don't want to over-accentuate some of that stuff that we don't need. I'm going to go into an ultra shaping mode here. All right. And that sounds pretty good to me. Okay. So now we've got the kick drum dialed in. Let's go ahead and start working on the snare. Now, often I'll play these together. Sometimes, you know, it pays to just listen individually until you kind of get where you need, and then bring other elements of the drums in. So we're going to start just focusing here on the snare by itself. Now, as I was saying before, I really wanted this to just slam, right? So, and as you heard in the other version, I think I actually was using the tube-modeled compressor on this. And if you take a look, we got a ratio of 11:1, so that means we're limiting here. All right, you can see on the gain reduction meter we're exceeding that 11 dB above the threshold, so we know that we're compressing properly. That's a pretty short release. And if I increase the attack a little bit more, you want to find the point where, with the snare drum, particularly if you're trying to make it thwap, you have to adjust that attack in real time to listen. When the attack is too fast, as you've heard before, it kind of clips it. And you get this, like, thwarted snap. So you want to keep adjusting. There's also a point, you could hear it right there, where it actually clicks, because the timing it's just off. So you're getting this almost like a click sound, because it's not reacting properly to the speed of the attack. So you want to keep increasing that until you get enough of that, bah, but not too much so that it starts to lose the punch. See, that's too much. It's not punchy anymore. So here's nothing. Here's with. Okay. Now, one thing here, this does not have a limiter circuit. And while we could use my Dynamics processor, which is another compressor that has some limiting built in as well, that one, it has a bit of an aggressive sound that I don't always like, and I don't know that I'm going to like it for this. So maybe I'll just use the gate from the SSL, and this will also allow me to do a little bit of equalization too. So you can see what I mean. Like, I could do post-compression EQ here, but I might want to do a little bit before we compress as well. And maybe we'll even change this. We'll go into a G channel just to give it a slightly different sound. Remember, I've talked about this a lot, where using the, just because you have 5 different EQs, don't assume they sound the same. They will very likely sound different. And that's kind of the key to making a remix and to really freshening up, bringing life to any music, is using different filters, different types of filters for different instruments to give them different sounds. So let's start here just with the gating first, okay? I'll make this so no gating. Gate. See what I mean? We're not clipping the attack. It sounds good. Now, again, we can start to play around with EQ. Let's get some of the crack of that snare. Oh, we're at the end. Now I could bring some top end in here, but we're going to get a lot of that from the overheads. So I'm going to leave it alone for right now. And I was hearing that whistle. You can hear that at 0.59, getting this, just this little boxiness that I didn't like. So we're going to pull some of that out. Just a little bit cleaner. All right. And now let's kick in that tube model compressor, which we're probably going to have to readjust the threshold a little bit. But let's take a listen. Hold on, we're going to wind back. So let's kick this in. Now see, you got to be careful. Some of those little hits, right? There was a couple of these where that the hi-hat is kind of sneaking through, and it's kind of making everything loud. So it's a careful balance when you're gating and you've got some of this stuff bleeding through, where you might want to be a little less aggressive with the gate, just so that you don't get some of those little things sneaking through, which kind of throw off the sound and would be a bit more noticeable when you bring all the other instruments back in. Let's take a listen here. I'm even going to leave it open a little bit longer. All right, nice. Fat, snappy. So again, let's do no effects. Flat, lifeless. Now it's bright, it's poppy, it's snappy. Oh, and here we need to adjust our gain, because we're slamming this somehow. Nice. We're going to go even more. Okay. And just to top it off, I'm going to place our hard limiter on here with a max amplitude of -2 and an input boost of 0, just to put a ceiling there so that we don't get this little clipping light happening. So this isn't really doing much except just providing that little bit of ceiling. Let's bring the kick in. All right. Now remember, we're just hearing the kick and snare right now, so there's no hat, there's no ambience, there's no brightness. We're going to bring all that in, all right? So let's now, we got the kick and the snare. Let's take a listen to the hat. Now this one we probably don't have to do too much to. It's playing pretty simply. The main thing with the hi-hat, let's put it in the center just for a second while we're playing around with this. You know, again, looking at this, there's not a lot of stuff happening. It's fairly dynamic and even. I'm not playing very busy. So I probably don't need any real compression on this. Some of that's going to be handled by the snare. Some of it will be kind of taken care of with the overheads as well. But we do want to just take a listen to the sound. Well, this should be logarithmic. How did they get on linear? All right. So it sounds pretty good. Could be a little brighter. It's a little mid-rangey for me. So let's go into our parametric on the track here and take a listen to this, all right? So again, we're going to be kind of listening here to some of these. It's a little wider. To mute my mic for this because this is getting in the way. 1 second. Now, one of the things you'll see that I did, I've got the high pass here, just rolling off everything below 100 hertz, 36 dB per octave, right? I don't need any low end bleed coming through the hi-hat track, right? That's all meant to be high frequency or high mid frequency. Now, we don't want to make it too bright because remember, again, a lot of this is going to be present in the overheads as well, but we want to give it its own color. And part of that is kind of removing some of the stuff that we don't want, because a lot of that top end brilliance will be brought out by the overheads. So there's actually a little bit of a crunchiness in the kind of upper, sort of mids, upper mids that I don't love. Right about there. So there's before, it's pretty subtle. And there's after. Now again, if I wanted to give this a little more top end, we could start maybe at around 10, or even go to just a high shelving filter here. Let's do that. Let's start around 9K, and watch as I start increasing this. So you really have to push it to get a lot of that super high-end brightness. Now that's okay. Might even go a little bit higher. Let's see if this starts to be bothersome. Now what that also means too is that we're going to drop the level on this. We don't need as much hi-hat. So again, let's put this to around 75% left. Let's take a listen here and we'll gradually increase this and bring the hi-hat in. Now, something else to remember too, I didn't put any effects on the snare. I probably want to do a nice little snare reverb or something. So let's go into our studio reverb for that. And let's choose a nice plate reverb. I think I actually like the sound of the drum plate large, but we'll back off on some of the wet signal here. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like. Get more dry. Okay, oh, and you know what? I want to put my levels over here too. I like having my levels on the side. I like my levels on the side. I don't know what that means. Okay. And let's take the mixer and we'll put that back over here. All right. So it's starting to come together now. Kick, snare, and hat. All right. So before we get to the toms, those are fairly easy actually, and I've got presets for those. Let's first bring in some of these overheads. Because again, the overheads add back in a lot of that room ambience and liveliness of the kit. All right. So let's just solo these two. So these are the overheads by themselves. All right. Now, it's always a good idea to listen to the overheads by themselves, just to hear if you're picking up any particular sort of low-end things that kind of can get in the way. It's not uncommon that you have some sort of low mid-range resonance, particularly on the overhead that is closer to, for instance, where the floor tom is. So like if I take a listen to this one here, this is on the right side. Let's put it in the center for a minute. I'm just going to pull this down. Okay, now again, it's got some nice tom presence in there. And if I look, I'm not really seeing much of anything, really. Really nothing below about 100. So I don't really have to play with anything down there. Maybe a little low-end boxiness, a little bit. You can hear it there. Just pull a little bit of that out. All right. And let's give it a little boost at around 11K. Give it a little bit of a lift. That might even be too much. All right, let's take a listen again. So before, after. All right, subtle. Again, you're going to have to listen in a good environment. I'm bringing back up my mic. You can just hear all the hard drive noise there. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do for this right side. There's really not much more I need to do there. I'm not going to use any compression on this because I'll let that be handled when I do a global compression limiter on all of the drums on that drum bus in about 3 minutes here. Probably going to go a couple minutes over, as we always do. All right, so let's solo the left. Let's put this back into the center. Okay, I'm just going to mute for 1 second. So did you hear that right there? So you're getting a little bit of the, again, the ring inherent in the snare is resonating at around 225. And this is a very narrow band at 8.1 Q. And it was just being accentuated a little because, again, these mics are open. They're capturing everything. And all of the drums are very likely to sort of, at some point, sympathetically resonate with one another. So these are the kind of things you're looking for. It wasn't super accentuated, but I was hearing it even before we boosted it. So now I'm going to be able to pull some of this out. Now again, with this, because this is on the left side, I've got a lot of the hi-hat in there that's kind of bright. In the kind of right in the mid-range. So I'm going to take a listen here and see if we can kind of pull some of that. It's just coming up a little harsh for me. Okay. All right. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and go left and right on this. Let's go ahead and bring these back down to around 9.2 respectively. Take a quick listen to these in stereo, just the overheads. Very nice and present. Now, one thing that we could do is if we wanted to kind of use some global reverbs just on these little ambients, we could. It'll definitely add some more, but again, we can also add that on everything. So let's start bringing this other stuff back in. And here, let's go back to the beginning of the track here, or close to it. Okay, sounding good. Let's go ahead now and work on those toms in our last couple of minutes here. So again, the toms, fairly simple what we need to do here. Just a little bit of EQ and compression to make them kind of punctuate, but for sure, gating. We want to clean those up. We don't want to leave all the bleed because I can guarantee on the tom mics, you are absolutely picking up a lot of the kick drum, low end, a lot of that just overall bleed. And when you take a listen to this soloed tom track, there's all this ring when it's not even playing. So you want to get rid of that. That's really going to mess up your drum sound. You don't want that in there. So again, I'm going to turn to one of my favorite plugins for that, just because it has such an easy way to adjust the gate. Let's go into our SSL here. And I've got a couple of presets in here. Actually, it's one that I modified a while ago. Where is it? It's just called floor tom, I think. Yeah, floor tom. Okay. So this is actually the high tom, but this same one with a slightly variable EQ can also sound really good. Let's take a listen here. Okay, and you see this has got a very long release. I don't need it quite so long, so we can bring that release way down. Let's take a listen to this hit right here. All right. All right. All right, and maybe make this a little less aggressive. Let's take a listen to this hit. Nice. Yeah, see, I don't like that, whatever that, some weird ring going on there. I don't like that at all. Yeah. Don't like that. Okay. So let's take a listen to this one over here. Sounds pretty good. Take a listen to this one here. Oh, now maybe I clipped the little beginning of that. Oh no, it's okay. All right. I'm actually going to drop the range too, so that doesn't go to total silence. And let's see, we've got our compression ratio here. Oh, 10 to 1. So yeah, I'm going to back that off a little. I'm just saying that wasn't sounding quite right to me. That's fine. Again. All right. See what I mean? It's hard. You can imagine doing this when you couldn't see where the waveform was. It was a real drag. It was a drag, man. All right. Let's wind this back. All right. Squash this down some more. I'm not worried about that. We've got the analog circuitry, and that's okay. Okay. So this is nice and clean. All right. Now, the floor tom plays even less frequently. So this one, we got to just highlight a section here. I'm just going to keep playing it back. Now, of course, for the floor tom, we might leave the gate open a little longer because the floor tom resonates a little bit longer. All right, let's go into the mono channel here as well. Use my same one as a starting point. Actually sounds really nice. Yeah, again, let's do like 4 to 1. All right, let's bring both of these in. Okay, now we're getting a little bit of some weird ring on this. So let's find where that is. So right about there. Probably use even a little bit of a subsonic filter right there. All right. So now that we've got this, let's take a listen to all of the drums together. All right. And this is where we'll now add a little sort of global effects on them as well. Let's go ahead and clear the time selection and wind back. And you can see on the global drum settings, I've got this IM pusher here, which I've got distorting a little. See vulgar drums. That's really distorted. I like it, but it's kind of too much. I kind of like it. It kind of works. So here, let's wind back just a little bit more and take a listen and try through. I'm going to play through some of these. Loop enhancer. Ooh. Listen to that. So here's nothing. Just the individual EQs. It's so dirty, I really like it. Toot monster, the toot monster, the toot monster. Now the other thing I want to show you here too, just to give you a different sound. Again, one of my favorites that I added recently back here is the DBX 160, sort of for just grouping drum compression, also known as the record maker, not unlike the SSL compressors. And they might even have, yeah, it's like a master bus compression. Let's see. I don't know if they have any just overall drums. I always talk about trying one. I haven't used many of these presets, so let's see. Let's see what this master sounds like. A little subtle. Ooh. Okay, that's really using that over easy compression. And you see what I'm saying now? We gotta drop that hi-hat. We're getting too much hat in there now. And see, it really just pops, right? So let's go back to this. Okay, so there's just the EQ'd and affected drums, but no global compression or limiting. Let's kick this in. And now, I might even bring those toms up even more to really punctuate. Maybe even more. Drop the overheads a little bit. Nice. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you here was based around something I talked about earlier, which is drum replacement. We spent a lot of time EQing and affecting to make the drums sound good. It's not uncommon in modern music that you just say, well, let's just replace the drum sound altogether. But it's actually very easy to replace the entire drum sound itself and even have the ability to sort of balance and mix between the original sample and this newly replaced sample. And to do that, I'm going to use a third-party effect, one that I've used for years and just recently refound again and repurchased, called Drumagog. They're on version 5 now. It's available for VST and AU if you're running on Mac as well. It's absolutely a fantastic plugin. It just works. You drop it on, you choose a sample, and it does the rest. It knows what to do. So I'm going to show you how easy this is. Let's just solo the kick drum by itself. And if we wind back and just take a listen. Okay? I mean, we got it sounding pretty good. This was the original without the EQ and compression. You can hear everything bleeding through, and it's kind of loose. It's a little flubby. So we want to make it even better. So let's go ahead and go to AU Wave Machine Labs Drumagog 5. Now again, this is a third-party effect. Lots of different drum trigger effects out there. I just happened to use this one years ago. I needed it for a recent project. Found it again, relicensed it, they're still around, it's awesome, and it just works. It even does all the detection, all the things that you need it to do, it does automatically. And even better, you'll see now I purposely left only the default samples included for the moment. I've got dozens and dozens that I need to install. Once you license, you have access to, it's literally hundreds of samples. It does this thing called dynamic and random multi-sampling, because obviously as you depress the beater on the kick drum, the sound is not exactly the same every time. So this automatically knows to swap out the samples to give you a more realistic sound. And this is something that they didn't really do, that a lot of these plugins didn't do years ago. So this is just genius. And it also does dynamic tracking of your transients. So again, all that bleed, the hi-hat, all the other instruments coming into those mics, forget it. It knows to avoid those, and it knows to only use the kick attack and then replace that with a new sample. Now you've got a lot of settings down here. You've got pitch of the actual sample. You can blend it with the original. We're going to start with this all the way off. And then you actually have the overhead mic that captured the sample that it's going to replace. The room sound, the stereo room mic'd of that sample, and then mixing in the direct sound as well. You've even got synthesis capabilities, so it's not uncommon, especially in like pop and hip hop, to trigger like a 60 hertz sine wave when you have a kick drum. You know, you hear this a lot. We're not going to do that here, but this does all of it. You can even do trigger filtering. It's just so cool, so easy. It looks kind of complex. It's truly plug and play. So let's go ahead and turn this on. Let's start playing back that kick drum. Now again, we've got the blend all the way down to off, so you're hearing the original sample. And notice, it knows exactly what those attacks should be. Now we've got adjustments here for transient detail, input and output. It just knows what to do. And now as I adjust to this blend, there's our new kick drum, right? And you can see how it's picking random samples for every attack based on the amplitude, the articulation. I mean, it's just absolutely genius. Now, similarly, if we wanted to do the same thing with the snare, we have the same capabilities. And I'm just going to show you very quickly. Let's go ahead and just remove all of these things. Now, we had to do a lot of work on that snare, right? There was some bleed. There was just a lot of things in there that we didn't really love. I'll leave the reverb on there, actually. We can leave that. Let's just disable it for the moment. Once again, let's go ahead and we'll grab Drumagog. Don't have to do anything. Don't have to figure out anything. Just go ahead and drop it on here. The only change we're going to make now, look, it automatically did it. Let's just grab the default snare. This is a Noble Cooley 5x14 maple snare drum. Leave everything at the defaults. Let's just go ahead and turn the blend down to 0 so you can hear what it's doing. I've got all this stuff enabled. Let's go ahead and play. Oh, let's just hold it, solo the snare. Notice it knows that those other hits, that's hi-hat. Don't use that. All right, and now let's bring it in. All All right, even the flams are working. And if we want to add a little more room in there, and again, maybe add just a little bit of the original, just to make it a little bit more lively. Remember, a lot of that's already going to be bleeding into the overheads. So now that we've got that in there, let's go ahead and re-solo all the drums. All right, super simple, super easy, and just a way to really change the whole character of a drum kit very, very quickly. All right, just using a little bit of drum replacement. Now again, we might want to do something like gate that kick drum. It's got a lot of low-end, sort of low-end resonance in there. So now we could take this same sample and we could perform a gate on here. You've even got additional options inside Drumagog to account for some of that. So drum replacement, something commonly done in music, very easy to do. Drumagog is my personal favorite. Drop it on, change your sample, and keep on mixing. Thank you so much again for joining me for Audio 101 Part 16, Remixing the Drums. We will see you next time.